Hello there and welcome to the Card Grotto. Today I've got a quick and easy way to create a tag shaped card using the Altenew Gracious Peony set. So let's get started. This is the beautiful Gracious Peony set from Altenew. There's a really large image there which is so pretty. And then I'm also using the simple colouring stencils to colour in the image. And then there's also a coordinating die as well. So I'm going to start off by stamping this large image onto a panel of classic Crest 110 solar white cardstock. I'm using the MISTI so that I can stamp it multiple times, and I'm inking up the image with Altenew permanent black ink. So just taking my time to really ink up that image, and then I can press that down onto the white cardstock using my fingers to run across the whole of the image. It is a very large image, so it's quite easy to kind of skip parts. I did get a pretty good impression the first time round, but I am just going to ink it up again just so that I get really nice crisp black lines. And you can see the difference there between the first and the second impression. So I've placed that down onto my work surface, holding it down with some tape. This is the colouring stencil set, and in it shows like how you would line up the stencils. It is pretty self-explanatory for this image, but there is a detailed layer of the stencils which I'm not going to use. This was my released card and I quite liked how it looked without the added layer at the end, so I thought I would do the same thing for this card as well. But because I used the kind of traditional peony pink colour for my flowers on the first card, I thought I would do something completely different and go with aquas. Although aquas aren't a traditional colour for peonies, I really love how it turned out. So I'm glad that I did use them in the end. These are the Sweet Dreams collection from Altenew. As you can see, I've got the cubes here. I really like the cubes. I think they work well for ink blending. I think if you were to stamp with them, which I do stamp with them, I think the larger ink pads probably are slightly better for that rather than the ink blending. But in terms of price point and also storage options, I really love these cubes. So I started off with the lightest layer, which is Dewdrops, and then I'm going in here with the Aqualicious colour, and I'm trying to focus most of the darkest colour kind of like towards the inside of the flowers. So that is different depending on what part of the flower it is, but in this case kind of like towards the bottom of the petals. I thought that I would use the darkest shade. In the end, I'm just using the three lightest shades. I do find with colouring with stencils in this way that often I need to go darker than I probably think I need to, because once the ink dries, it kind of lightens up a little bit. And you don't get so much of a contrast between the lighter areas and the darker areas. But in this case, I think it still worked quite nicely with just the three lighter shades. So this is stencil number 2 here that I've just placed on top. I'm holding the stencils down with Altenew Satin masking tape. It's quite a good tape for ink blending in particular, because if you get any ink on it, it just cleans off really easily. So that's the second layer all done. Just peeling off that tape so I can remove the stencil. And then I can bring in the last stencil for the flowers. So just using those same 3 shades. I'm using an Altenew mini ink blending brush here. I really like these brushes for stenciling in particular. They've got really lovely soft bristles, and I think they work quite well with these smaller, well, this is quite a large image really, but they work quite well with kind of smaller areas. So that's the petals done, and for the leaves I'm going to use the Altenew Green Valley inks. These are really quite bright inks, and again I'm just using the 3 lightest shades. I probably could have got away with just the 2 lightest, to be honest, but like I said, sometimes when the ink dries, it dries a little bit lighter, so I thought I would go in with that darkest shade just where the leaves meet the flowers. And then the best part of any stenciling, you get to remove the stencil and see what's underneath. And I think these 2 colours work really nicely together. So I've got the Gracious Peonies die, and I'm just holding that in place with some low tack tape, and then I'm going to run that through my die cutting machine. This is a really large image. It would work really nicely on a 5x7 card as well as an A2 sized card. So I've got the Versatile Greetings set from Altenew here, and I'm going to use that as my sentiment on my card. I love this set. It's got the shadow and the words for lots of different words that you might want to put on any projects. And I'm going to cut the shadow layer from Vellum, and then I'm adding some double-sided adhesive sheet onto the back of some black cardstock, and I'm going to use that to die cut the word itself. I find it quite helpful with the adhesive sheet if I'm layering up words like one on top of each other. It's just quite handy to have that adhesive on the back. I mean, it's not a particularly intricate die with the wording. Some of them like are really thin, and you don't necessarily want glue on the back because it's going to seep out. It wouldn't do that with this one, but it's still quite handy just to have it. So I've cut that word another 2 times so that I've got 3 of the hugs, and I'm just going to lay those on top of each other. So I'm just removing the word from the negative portion, just using some tweezers just to try and lift that out without kind of moving it too much. And I like to keep the bottom layer in the negative just to make sure that I'm keeping it in the place where it's supposed to be. Sometimes the small bits in between the letters can distort quite easily, so it's quite helpful just to have it placed down in the negative. And then once I've layered those all on top of each other, I can lift that out, and it's a bit more stable at this point. And then I can place it down onto the shadow. And then once that's down, I can really press down well with a bone folder. I've now got an A2 size white card base here. So this is a finished size of 4 1/4 inches by 5.5 inches. And I'm going to cut it down into a tag shape. This really could be any shape at all, but I thought I would show you a quick and easy way to create a tag shaped card. So I'm just drawing some pencil lines here. I'm not actually using the ruler as a measuring tool. I'm actually just using it as a straight line. And I've just kind of made 2 marks there where I want to chop off the corner. And then I'm just drawing a line in between so that when I take it to my guillotine, I can see where I want to cut that corner off. And then because I haven't measured anything, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that corner that I have cut off, and I'm going to rotate it. So that's the corner as is. I'm going to rotate it and use that as a guide so that I can cut the other side of the card base off. And then it's going to be completely equal. I haven't had to do any measuring or anything like that. This is a really quick and easy way to create tags of all different sizes. I'm using it as a tag shaped card today, but you could easily do this just as a tag. I learnt this trick from my friend Karen Baker, and it's, like I said, really helpful. I'm not creating a tag today, so I'm not going to create a hole in the card, but you could easily do that with a hole punch or something like that if you wanted to actually make it into a tag. I've got my image here, and I'm just kind of placing it down so that I can see where I'm going to end, like stick it down basically. But I didn't want there to be just completely white in the background. So I'm taking the residual ink from my ink blending tool, and I'm just adding that onto the card base. So it's going to kind of peek out from behind those flowers and sort of make it look like there would either be a sky behind the flowers or there'd be extra flowers kind of blurred out a little bit. It just helps to add a little bit of detail onto a clean and simple card. So I've added some foam tape onto the back of the image, and then I can place that down onto the card. So I'm just using some tweezers here so that I can kind of hover it over the card, see where I want it to be placed before I press that down. And then I'm going to take some scissors and cut off the excess overhanging. I really love having things overhang a card base. The downside is that it doesn't fit in a standard size envelope unless you make the card base smaller, which I have done in the past. But in this instance, I wanted to keep it the same size, so I did cut off those edges. I've added some liquid glue onto the back of the Hugs word, just making sure that it's where the black cardstock is rather than the vellum, so that it's not going to seep through and you're not going to see it through the vellum. And then I can press that down as well. And then I'm just going to finish off by embellishing with a few enamel dots. And because I added the image down with foam tape, and I didn't add the foam tape all the way to the edge of the image, I can pop some of those enamel dots behind the image. That's just a personal preference, like a style preference, I suppose. But sometimes it's quite helpful for me to use foam tape rather than sort of layering up images with cardstock, so that I've got that space to kind of pop those enamel dots behind. And I thought that black would really kind of bring all of the images together. You've got the black lines for the stamped images, and then also that sentiment as well. So it's a really clean and simple card, but I like that the shape of it is just something a little bit different. Stands up as usual with an A2 card, but like I said, just something a little bit different. Links to the products that I used will be listed in the description bar on YouTube and also over on my blog. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.